2, 1.
I'd like to talk about significant figures and calculations that we will be doing. We learned that significant figures only apply to measured quantities, and so one question some of you may have is, why do we even worry about this concept of sig figs or significant figures? Well, the reason is because our answers from our calculations that we make, if we were to, for say, calculate a density, we would need to first measure the mass and the volume. Both of those being measured numbers, there's some uncertainty in those numbers because remember, you have to estimate your last digit when you record your measurement. And so there's some uncertainty in any measurement. So our answers cannot be more precise than the measurements from which they were calculated. So that's the reason we need to be very mindful of significant figures when we're doing calculations involving measurements. When we're rounding to specific significant figures, we're going to follow the rules for rounding that you learned back in elementary and middle school when you first learned how to round. If the number that comes after the last digit that you want to keep, if it's less than 5, you're going to leave the number and then drop off the numbers you don't need. So we call that rounding down. If the number after the last digit you want to keep is greater than or equal to 5, though, we're going to round up by 1. So let's do an example of practice some rounding to proper sig figs or to asked for sig figs using this measurement, 56.212 meters. So let's say that we were to need to round that to only 4 significant figures. Well, all non-zero digits are significant. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to count all of these digits here. Those are the 4 digits you want to keep. So now you're going to look at the number following the last digit you want to keep. So the last digit we want to keep is a 1. So now you look at the next digit. It's a 2. The 2 is less than 5. So we're going to record our answer as 56.21 meters. And that would be 4 significant figures. Let's say we wanted to round it to 2 significant figures. So we'd come to our number and we'd count the first 2 significant figures, and here's where we would be rounding. So now again, you look at the number following that, which is a 2. The 2 will not round that 6 up. It's less than 5, so you would write your answer as 56 meters if we wanted to express that to only 2 significant figures. Now, what if we wanted to round it so it only had 1 significant figure? That means we would be keeping the 5 as our significant figure. So since the 5 is the last digit we want to keep, you're going to look at the number immediately after that, which is a 6. Now, the 6 is greater than 5, so it goes to this part. If it's greater than or equal to 5, we're going to round up by 1. So the 6 rounds the 5 up to a 6. And of course, we would never round 56 to just 6. So what we have to remember is we need to put our 0 for our placeholder here. The rule for trailing zeros, which is what this is they do not count unless you put a decimal. So as long as you don't put a decimal here, that is 1 sig fig. So your answer would be reported as 60 meters. So let's say we're doing some calculations that involve addition and subtraction. Here's the rule for addition and subtraction. The answer should have the same number of decimal places as the measurement with the least decimal places. Your answer should have the same number of decimal places as the measurement with the least decimal places. So let's take a look at a calculation where we're adding. So you're going to look at decimal places when you add and subtract, and look at the number of decimal places or places past your decimal. So this number has 2 decimal places, this number has 1 decimal place, and this number has 2 decimal places. So the number with the least decimal places is the one that has only 1 decimal place. So you plug all that into your calculator, and this is what your calculator is going to say when you calculate that. But now we're ready to round it. So since this had only one decimal place, it had the fewest decimal places, I'm going to round my answer so that it has only one decimal place. So you're rounding it here. And now you're going to look at the 6. The 6 is going to round the 7 up. So you would write your answer as 369.8 meters. One decimal place here because this had one decimal place. That was the fewest decimal places. Another example here. This number has 3 decimal places and this number has 2 decimal places. So you plug that into your calculator. When you add that together, you're now going to round this so that it has only 2 decimal places because this number has the fewest decimal places. It determines that our answer should also have 2 decimal places. So the 6 rounds this 6 up, and so we would write our answer as 102.97. 6 rounds the 6 up, and you would write it as meters. Again, 1 decimal place here, determined we needed 1 decimal place in this answer. This had 2 decimal places, which was the fewest, so we rounded this to only 2 decimal places. So when you're adding and subtracting, you look at decimal places. What if you are multiplying and dividing? If you're multiplying and dividing, your answer should be rounded so that it has the same number of significant figures as the number with the least significant figures. So we're going to be looking now at our whole number, looking at the sig figs, figuring out how many sig figs are in each of the numbers that we are multiplying or dividing. And then we're going to round our answer so that it has the same number of sig figs as the measurement with the least sig figs. So here, the 7.55, it has 3 significant figures. The 0.34 has 2 significant figures because remember, leading zeros do not count. So when you plug this in, you multiply, your calculator is going to tell you they would multiply and give you a product of 2.567. So now we're ready to round. This has 2 sig figs, and this one has 3 sig figs. So now we're looking at the entire number when you multiply and divide. So we're going to round our answer so it has only 2 sig figs because that's our fewest sig figs. So now we're rounding it here. The 6 is going to round the 5 up. So you would record your answer as 2.6, and then remember your units. When you multiply meter times meter, you get meters squared. So that would be your answer. Let's look at one final example. Here we're dividing. So we have 2.10 divided by 7.596. So our numerator has 3 significant figures. The trailing 0 counts because of the decimal here. Our denominator has 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. So 3 sig figs is our least sig fig. We're going to divide and we're going to round our answer so it has only 3 sig figs. Now my calculator gives me this, 0.0276612,954. That's a lot of digits there. We can't keep all of those. Our answers have to be rounded to the least sig figs. We need 3. So the leading 0 does not count. So we're going to round the 2, the 7, and the 6 are going to count. There's my first 3 sig figs. So they're the ones I'm going to keep, and I'm going to look at the 4. The 4 is not going to round the 6 up. So we're going to write our answer as 0.276. And the unit, meters, cancels with one of the meters here, leaving you with meter to the first power. And that answer would be rounded properly to 3 sig figs. All right, that's our lesson on math with significant figures. I hope this helps.